Ah, yes. Oh, hello. I was just about to have my Easter treat. Happy Easter to everyone out there. I'll save that for later. So here we are at the last episode in book one, last chapter in book one. Sorry, gotta keep remembering that chapters, books, not episodes and seasons. That's how I keep track of things. Um, So, not much to say here at the beginning, other than stick around after I've finished my usual end of chapter reading, and I will have a couple of quick announcements to make about book two and some other things that will be coming soon in the future. Until then, I'll see you in just a few seconds after the intro. By the way, how did you all like the new intro? That popped up not because I wanted to try something new, but because I lost the other intro due to a computer having to be nuked and paved. Uh, so I had to come up with a new one, and I decided to do something a little bit different, a little bit fancy, added a little bit of music in it. Hope y'all liked it. If not, then I'm sorry. Anyways, I'll see you in a minute. Run that new intro. Hello, and welcome to chapter 26 of book one of You Should Be Reading. Today we're going to be talking about a book, the first book in a massive series, um, massive fantasy epic series created by a very well known author. There's all kinds of mystical hoodoo doo and stuff going on in there. No, it's not Game of Thrones, if that's what you're thinking. It is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, book one of The Wheel of Time. Now, don't go away. Hear me out. All right? I understand there's a lot of people that have some mixed feelings about this series. Um, One of my friends who I've talked to many times in the past about books and movies and things, he found it to be eminently forgettable. After he finished reading it, he couldn't remember anything that he had read, more or less. It was a book that bored him, and he didn't see the need to get into the series. But that's fine. I can understand that. He at least tried it. He at least looked into it, read the first book, which is more than I can say for some people. Now, The Wheel of Time, as a epic fantasy series, I myself um, have read about, I think, 9 or 10 of the books in the series. It's about where I stopped reading partway through either the 9th or the 10th book. I'm not entirely sure. But I'd kept up to it, and I'd read up till that point. I'd eagerly awaited the 7th and the 8th and the 9th book to come out. But I found, as it was being written, as time was going on, because I'd gone back and then reread everything that I had just so I was up to date, I noticed something then when I did the rereading of it. I noticed that the early books, the first, the second, the third, were different than the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, which were also different than the seventh and the eighth and the ninth. There was a different underlying feeling to it all, which it didn't grab me as much as the first book did. Now, the first book, The Eye of the World, let's get into details here. Basically, it is all about a world. I think there's a map here. Where's that map at? Yes, right here. You can kind of see it. There we go. one of these big fantasy maps. You get the oceans, you get all this and that, you got over here. Stuff happening. And it has kingdoms. There's like 14 different kingdoms in this world. There's other ones that are not shown on this map that get introduced later. There's all kinds of, each one of these little countries in here has their own culture, their own particular brand of how things work. Two prime examples. One is Karahin, I think it's called, pronounced Karahin, something like that. It is a very politically minded area. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. That would be Tyr. Tyr is a very politically minded area. That is the one where the game of houses happens, and all kinds of interesting, fun things go on there. Then you've got where are you? Where are you? I see you here. I think it's Altara. I think Altara is the one. That is the one that is the home of the Inquisition. That is out to hunt down all witches who, the females who use magic in the world and destroy them because they are evil and bad and will bring about the end of the world. Because that's what this is. This is a story, a fantasy epic all about the end of the world. That it was prophesized a long time ago. And it will involve a man known as the Dragon. Back then, way back then. Actually, the Dragon Reborn, I should say. Because way back in the days when the world was destroyed, pretty much the last time, that was the Dragon, a man named Luz Theron. And the Dragon Reborn is prophesied to be Luz Theron reincarnated. And he will break the world again. And so you have these witches, these Aes Sedai, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. They are out to find this man and either destroy him so he can't destroy the world, or control him, a smaller faction of it. So what happens is, in a small little corner of the world where nobody really important has ever been born, it's a tiny little farming community far away from everyone. And Aes Sedai and her warder comes into town for a festival event. And all of a sudden, monsters are attacking that night. Monsters that hadn't been seen that far south in quite a while. They are up near the north, the northern mountains, on the border on the Blighted Lands there. They hadn't been seen that long. They showed up with nasty other creatures and whatnot, and she realizes, because she came there on a hunch or on information, it's been a while since I've read it, to find someone. And she has a feeling that one of three friends, one of three boys, Randall Thor, Perrin Alvera, and Matt Cawthon, one of those three is going to be the Dragon Reborn. So she gathers up those three. Also, a friend of the three, a woman by the name of Egwene Alvera, because Egwene she has the power of being an Aes Sedai. And not only that, so does the head of the Women's Council of this area. Because you have the men, and then you have the women, and the women tend to kind of control the men in a way. There's a little bit of that going on. But the head of the Women's Council, Nynaeve, I think it's Nynaeve, she is actually my favorite character of all of these, simply because she is such a spitfire of a girl. But she basically bullies her way in that she's going to be going along because she's not going to let Egwene go by herself. And nor will she let the three boys go by themselves with some uppity Aes Sedai. So off they go to escape the evil monsters and whatnot. And they have a grand adventure on the journey all the way to the north, to the tower. And by the end of the book, I could say spoiler warning, but considering there's 14 books in this series, this book's been out for a while, I think I'm safe. But in the end, hey, Bubby, uh, in the end, they fight some nasty, evil people who were supposed to be sealed up thousands and thousands of years ago by Lews Therin, but seem to have popped up. They fight them, and Randall Thor demonstrates that he has the same type of power as the Aes Sedai do. And because of that, they're pretty sure he is the Dragon Reborn. And it goes from there into the next book, into the series. Now, this is a massive, massive series. Sitting at about, I believe, 14 books right now. Robert Jordan sadly passed away before he could finish writing it. Brandon Sanderson picked it up and finished it from his notes. Now, it is a massive series. And while I have not finished reading it, one day I likely will. I will likely get back into it. Because the thing I love so much about this are not only the diversity of the characters that you have, they're kind of archetypical in a way, but they're based on archetypes, is what it is. They're based on these archetypes and built into their own fully fleshed out characters as things go. But it's not just the characters, it's the world. The world that he has crafted for them to be in is so richly detailed, so fleshed out, so intense that I was drawn to continue reading beyond the fact that there was some of the characters that I no longer cared about. I still cared about Nynaeve. I lost caring about Randall Thor and what happened to him. Perrin Alvera, he was kind of there. Matt Cawthon, he was one of the ones that I always kept. I always liked him. I wanted to find out more about what happened to him. There was a whole book that didn't even have him in it, and I was intensely disappointed about that. Because I was like, what happened to him? Why'd you leave him out of that one? And that's the way it happens. But the world itself is what pulled me along. Because it was so richly detailed. So many intricacies. He has a whole encyclopedia out. A massively thick book. Just all about that world. And everything that's in it. And the simple characters and the jovial personalities. The magic system. The monsters. Everything about it is really good. So, this week, I think you should be reading The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Now, maybe you might not like it, maybe you might, but you'll never know unless you give it a chance. And that's all I really ask. So, for this week, I will leave you with Chapter 1, An Empty Road. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. Born below the ever cloud-capped peaks that gave the mountains their name, the wind blew east, out across the sand hills, once the shore of a great ocean, before the breaking of the world. Down it flailed into the two rivers, into the tangled forest called the Westwood, and beat at the two men walking with a cart and horse down the rock-strewn track called the Quarry Road. For all that spring should have come a good month since, the wind carried an icy chill, as if it would rather bear snow. Gusts plastered Randall Thor's cloak to his back, whipped the earth-colored wool around his legs, then streamed it out behind him. He wished his coat were heavier, or that he had worn an extra shirt. Half the time, when he tried to tug the cloak back around him, it caught on the quiver swinging at his hip. Trying to hold the cloak one-handed did not do much good anyway. He had his bow in the other, an arrow nocked and ready to draw. As a particularly strong blast tugged the cloak out of his hand, he glanced at his father over the back of the shaggy brown mare. He felt a little foolish about wanting to reassure himself that Tam was still there, but it was that kind of day. The wind howled when it rose, but aside from that, quiet lay heavy on the land. The soft creak of the axle sounded loud by comparison. No birds sang in the forest, no squirrels chittered from a branch. Not that he expected them, really, not this spring. Only trees that kept leaf or needle through the winter had any green about them. Snarls of last year's brambles spread brown webs over stone outcrops under the trees. Nettles numbered most among the few weeds. The rest were the sorts with sharp burrs or thorns, or stinkweed, which left a rank smell on the unwary boot that crushed it. Scattered white patches of snow still dotted the ground, where tight clumps of trees kept deep shade. Where sunlight did reach, it held neither strength nor warmth. The pale sun sat above the trees to the east, but its light was crisply dark, as if mixed with shadow. It was an awkward morning, made for unpleasant thoughts. Without thinking, he touched the nock of the arrow. It was ready to draw to his cheek in one smooth movement, the way Tam had taught him. Winter had been bad enough on the farms, worse than even the oldest folk remembered, but it must have been harsher still in the mountains, if the number of wolves driven down into the two rivers was any guide. Wolves raided the sheep pens and chewed their way into barns to get at the cattle and horses. Bears had been after the sheep, too, where a bear had not been seen in years. It was no longer safe to be out after dark. Men were the prey as often as sheep, and the sun did not always have to be down. Tam was taking steady strides on the other side of Bella, using his spear as a walking staff. Ignoring the wind that made the brown cloak flap like a banner, now and again he touched the mare's flank lightly, to remind her to keep moving. With his thick chest and broad face, he was a pillar of reality in that morning, like a stone in the middle of a drifting dream. His sun-roughened cheeks might be lined, and his hair have only a sprinkling of black among the gray, but there was a solidness to him, as though a flood could wash around him without uprooting his feet. He stomped down the road now impassively. Wolves and bears were all very well, his manner said, things that any man who kept sheep must be aware of, but they had best not try to stop Tam Thor getting to Emmons Field. With a guilty start, Rand returned to watching his side of the road, Tam's matter-of-factness reminding him of his task. He was a head taller than his father, taller than anyone else in the district, and had a little of Tam in him physically, except perhaps for a breadth of shoulder. Gray eyes and the reddish tinge to his hair came from his mother, so Tam said. She had been an outlander, and Rand remembered little of her aside from a smiling face, though he did put flowers on her grave every year at Beltane in the spring and at Sunday in the summer. 2 small casks of Tam's apple brandy rested in the lurching cart, and 8 larger barrels of apple cider, only slightly hard after a winter's curing. Tam delivered the same every year to the Wine Spring Inn for use during Beltane, and he had declared that it would take more than wolves or a cold wind to stop him this spring. Even so, they had not been to the village for weeks. Not even Tam traveled much these days. But Tam had given his word about the brandy and cider, even if he had waited to make delivery until the day before festival. Keeping his word was important to Tam. Rand was just glad to get away from the farm, almost as glad about the coming of Beltane. As Rand watched his side of the road, the feeling grew in him that he was being watched. For a while he tried to shrug it off. Nothing moved or made a sound among the trees, except the wind. But the feeling not only persisted, it grew stronger. The hairs on his arms stirred, his skin prickled, as if it itched on the inside. He shifted his bow irritably to rub at his arms, and told himself to stop letting fancies take him. There was nothing in the woods on his side of the road, and Tam would have spoken if there had been anything on the other. He glanced over his shoulder and blinked. Not more than 20 spans back, down the road, a cloaked figure on horseback followed them. Horse and rider alike, black, dull, and ungleaming. It was more habit than anything else that kept him walking backward alongside the cart even while he looked. The rider's cloak covered him to his boot tops. The cowl tugged well forward so that no part of him showed. Vaguely, Rand thought there was something odd about the horseman, but it was the shadowed opening of the hood that fascinated him. He could see only the vaguest outlines of a face, but he had the feeling he was looking right into the rider's eyes, and he could not look away. Queasiness settled in his stomach. There was only shadow to see in the hood, but he felt hatred as sharply as if he could see a snarling face. Hatred for everything that lived. Hatred for him most of all. For him above all things. Abruptly, a stone caught his heel and he stumbled, breaking his eyes away from the dark horseman. His bow dropped to the road, and only an out-thrust hand grabbing Bella's harness saved him from falling flat on his back. With a startled snort, the mare stopped, twisting her head to see what had caught her. So I will leave you with that. The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Book 1 of The Wheel of Time. And now for my little announcements. This is the end of Book 1, as I said, the final chapter. There will be a break of a couple of weeks where I will not be updating You Should Be Reading. When I do update, it will be to start Chapter 1 of Book 2 of You Should Be Reading. And we'll go from there. Also, to let you know that sometime in the future, I'm not sure yet as to the dates, but I will be beginning to work on and upload some other content to the site as well. I've got a few things in mind. I don't want to spoil anything and let you know ahead of time, but there's a few things that I'm looking to do. There also may be a change to the name of my channel. As right now, it is simply You Should Be Reading, because I'm doing videos about books. But I may be doing videos about other things in the future, and as such, it wouldn't really fit in with the title of the channel being You Should Be Reading. So that may be changing as well. Just let you know, I don't have a timeline on that yet, but don't be surprised if it happens. So, for now, my friends and loyal readers, I wish you a good evening and hope you all had a happy Easter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a treat to wolf down. So, take care, and until next time, remember, you should be reading.